upheld an earlier ruling by a lower court that government was not bound by a 3-year wage deal with public sector unions. Unions, of course, unhappy, but government will be relieved as keeping the massive public wage sector bill under control is a key pillar in this year's budget plan. Well, let's discuss this now with Labour analyst and columnist Terry Bell. Thanks for chatting to us, Terry. So year 3 of the deal is essentially scrapped. Does that mean that we're going to go back to the table and we're likely to have protracted deadlocks and renewed wage negotiations that might end up in a strike?
Well, they start in March again, and it's going to be because there's no trust now. Trust is gone. Because let's face facts, you know, trade unions have a very straightforward view about collective bargaining and the agreements that flow from these. And actually it's a view that's supported by the International Labour Organization and the conventions which this government signed up to. And very simply, it boils down to the fact, I think you and I could agree, well, I certainly agree with it, that if you have a legitimate group of people who come together and reach an agreement, sign on the dotted line or shake hands as it used to be, that agreement should hold. There's even a fancy legal term for it, pacta sunt servanda, which simply means an agreement should be honored. An agreement was reached in 2018 after 6 months of incredibly hard negotiation, mainly because the government insisted, the government representatives, including the minister at the time, insisted on a 3-year deal. The unions did not want a 3-year deal. Finally, it was decided, and the unions gave way and agreed to a 3-year deal. To me, it was summed up perfectly by Basil Manuel in January last year, the head of the teacher union, NAPTOSA. He said it was very much like buying a car from a dealer for a 3-year deal that you agree to pay off. You pay off for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, you say, I'm not paying anymore, but you keep the car. And that's actually what has happened. Now, the legal niceties here, there's a lovely technicality because of government regulations that exist within the Department of Public Sector, Public Service, etc., and also the Constitutional Court. I looked it up. It's quite incredible to read. In fact, the government should be taken to court on this whole thing because of the lack of fiduciary responsibility. What it says is that now this whole agreement has gone by the board for the simple reason that the minister did not have the authority to negotiate and didn't have the budget to agree to it. But the point was, for 2 years, obviously Cabinet, everybody else agreed to it. If government can be seen like a normal company with normal subsidiaries in each department, then how can you use one subsidiary to try and basically screw the workers?
I mean, you know, what you're saying is that basically there's a bit of a technicality that they got out of this deal. So that doesn't sound like it's setting a precedent. But the point you're making, of course, is it's broken the trust. Ayanda Dlodlo, the minister, was just chatting to Shahan, and she said that the situation is really dire when Shahan asked, is there going to be any money for any increase this year? Bearing in mind the government is in a really dire situation. And that the budget's actually predicated on keeping this bill really under control. Obviously, workers feel it's completely unfair to make them have to pay for it. But do you think that government is serious about sticking to this? Because you've got the budget on the one hand, on the other, they might have to go through protracted strikes, stayaways, loss of services. Do you think government is prepared to go down to the wire on this issue?
The devil again is in the detail. Who is the public sector? What is the public sector? We have a vastly bloated, for example, cabinet. We have, I've forgotten, I've stopped counting now, but I think it's 63 ministers and deputy ministers, etc. Bigger than the United States or Germany or Britain or whatever. We have hugely highly paid senior managers. We have vastly overpaid executives in state-owned organizations. We have a situation where you have managerial level people paid huge amounts, but the people who carried us, because don't worry, COVID will be brought into this, we've been hit by that.
Yeah.
Who were the people who really carried things? The nurses, the nursing assistants, the ordinary staff on the ground. They're highly paid.
Do you think then that government ultimately is going to end up backing down? Because it's backed down in the past, hasn't it?
I can't see them backing down, because the point is that they've never done anything in terms of really reducing the areas that the unions have complained about. I mean, if you take just the amount of money lost over the COVID thing in terms of corruption, would have more than paid the additional wage bill. So the point is, what we have here is a managerial structure, which is the government, which is actually responsible and trying to make the working people pay for it. It's a ridiculous situation. It happens all the time, I know, but it has destroyed a load of confidence. I think even among the most loyal of the trade union supporters of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget that COSATU is part of the Tripartite Alliance. What do you think is going to happen next, realistically, Terry?
I don't know. Unfortunately, the trade union movement has been badly weakened. We don't have any sort of really coherent alternative emerging. There are loads of sort of movements about let's have some real democracy instead of this pseudo-democratic farce that we have of voting for a party every 5 years, and then they go off and do what they want to do, and we end up then at a local government level with people shooting one another in order to get seats in the local council. We're on a very dangerous course, which not towards a failed state. I don't believe that. We're too wealthy. We have too many minerals, etc. We are on the road towards perhaps becoming a gangster state, and that's even more worrying.
All right. Thank you very much, Labour analyst and columnist Terry Bell there.